surface, but coiled and ready to strike. The only person who seemed to have any insight into Violet's true state of mind was Samuel, and even he was kept at arm's length as she focused more and more intensively on her preparations. During their rare moments together, he would try to draw her out, to understand what was happening behind her increasingly impenetrable facade. "You're changing, Violet," he told her one night in August as they sat in the small garden behind the slave quarters, speaking in whispers to avoid detection. "You're becoming someone I don't recognize." Violet looked up at the stars, barely visible through the oppressive humidity, and sighed. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Samuel saw a glimpse of the pain and rage she had been carrying alone for so many weeks. "They took everything from me," she said quietly. "My mama, my childhood, my freedom. And when I finally found something worth caring about, when I found you, they took that too. They beat you like an animal and made me watch. They starved me and made it into entertainment." Samuel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "That don't mean you got to become like them." "I'm not becoming like them," Violet replied, and the coldness in her voice made Samuel's skin crawl. "They destroy because they enjoy it. I'm going to destroy because it's necessary." "What are you planning, Violet? What are you going to do?" She looked at him for a long moment, and Samuel saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before, a kind of peace that was somehow more terrifying than any rage could have been. "I'm going to serve them exactly what they deserve," she said. "Nothing more, nothing less." As summer began its slow transition into fall, Violet's preparations entered their final phase. She had identified the substances she would need, tested their effects in small doses, and studied the family's routines until she could predict their behavior with clock-like precision. Now all that remained was to choose the perfect moment and execute her plan with the same flawless precision she brought to preparing a 7-course meal. The opportunity she had been waiting for presented itself in late September when Octave announced that the family would be hosting a grand Sunday supper to celebrate the successful harvest of their sugar crop. The meal would mark not just the end of the growing season, but also Octave's triumph over the financial difficulties that had plagued him throughout the year. Creditors had been paid, debts satisfied, and the plantation was once again on solid financial footing. It would be, Octave declared, a feast to remember. As September's heat began to ease into the more bearable warmth of early fall, the Beauregard mansion buzzed with preparations for what Octave had declared would be the finest Sunday supper New Orleans has ever witnessed. The successful sugar harvest had not only rescued the family from their financial difficulties, but had also restored Octave's confidence in his position as one of the city's most prominent plantation owners. The guest list for this celebration read like a who's who of Louisiana society. Judge Honoré Dufresne and his wife would attend, along with banker Edouard Blanchard and the influential merchant Alcée Boudreau. The Reverend Father Antoine Marigny would bless the meal, while Dr. Armand Thibodeau would be present both as family physician and as one of Octave's oldest friends. Even Mayor Augustus Chouteau had accepted the invitation, bringing the total number of guests to 23 souls who would join the 13 members of the Beauregard family for an evening of celebration and excess. For Violet, this represented the culmination of everything she had been working toward. A grand Sunday supper with the extended family and New Orleans' most prominent citizens would provide the perfect stage for her final performance. The scale of the event would require her to work with absolute precision, coordinating multiple courses while maintaining the flawless timing that had made her reputation throughout the city. But what made this evening particularly perfect for Violet's purposes was a decision Octave had made regarding the staff. Due to the importance of the occasion, he had decreed that all the house slaves would remain in the mansion throughout the evening, ready to attend to any need that might arise. This meant that when the moment came, everyone who had participated in or witnessed her humiliation would be present to see its resolution. As the days leading up to the supper unfolded, Violet threw herself into preparations with an intensity that impressed even the jaded members of the Beauregard household. She spent hours at the French market, selecting ingredients with a meticulousness that bordered on obsession. Each tomato was examined for perfect ripeness, each cut of meat inspected for ideal marbling, and each herb tested for optimal potency and freshness. Her menu for the evening was a masterpiece of Creole cuisine that would showcase not only her skills, but also the full range of her knowledge about food and its effects on the human body. The meal would begin with a delicate turtle soup, seasoned with precisely the right balance of herbs to stimulate appetite and create a sense of anticipation for what would follow. This would be followed by pompano prepared with an elaborate sauce that required hours of careful preparation and timing. The third course would feature squab stuffed with an intricate mixture of rice, vegetables and seasonings that had been in Violet's family for generations, though she had made certain modifications to the traditional recipe that none of her ancestors would have approved of. The meat courses would include both beef and pork, prepared in different styles, accompanied by vegetables from the mansion's own garden and bread that had been rising for exactly the right amount of time to achieve perfect texture and flavor. But it was the dessert course that represented Violet's true masterpiece. She planned to serve her famous bread pudding, made with pralines and a custard sauce that had been the talk of New Orleans society for years. The recipe had been her mother's secret, passed down through generations of enslaved cooks who had perfected it in plantation kitchens throughout Louisiana. Violet had spent years refining the dish until it reached a level of complexity and sophistication that made it the requested finale for every important Beauregard dinner. What none of the diners would realize was that Violet had spent the past month perfecting a very different kind of recipe, one that would transform this celebration into something far more memorable than any of them could possibly imagine. Her final preparations began on Friday morning when she made her last visit to Mama Brigitte's stall in the French market. The old woman greeted her with the same knowing smile she had worn during all their previous encounters, but this time there was something different in her ancient eyes, a kind of sadness that seemed to acknowledge what was about to unfold. "You sure about this path you're walking, child?" Mama Brigitte asked as she wrapped the final herbs Violet would need in a piece of brown paper. "Once you start down this road, there ain't no turning back." Violet met her gaze without flinching. "I'm already too far down the road to turn back. They made sure of that." Mama Brigitte nodded slowly and handed over the package. "Then may God have mercy on all your souls," she whispered, "because none of you going to find it anywhere else." That weekend, as Violet began the intricate process of preparing for Sunday's feast, her behavior took on an almost ritualistic quality that disturbed those who observed it closely. She moved through the kitchen with the precision of a clockmaker assembling the most delicate timepiece, each action calculated and deliberate. Her usual practice of humming while she worked had ceased entirely, replaced by a silence that seemed to fill the kitchen like fog. Samuel, still recovering from his injuries but now able to move around the plantation with limited mobility, found excuses to visit the kitchen throughout the weekend. What he saw there filled him with a dread he couldn't quite articulate. Violet worked with mechanical precision, her face expressionless as she prepared components of the meal with a kind of cold artistry that bore no resemblance to the joy she had once taken in cooking. On Saturday evening, as Violet finished the preliminary preparations for the next day's feast, Samuel finally confronted her directly. He waited until the kitchen was empty except for the two of them, then approached her as she stood cleaning her knives with obsessive thoroughness. "Violet, I'm begging you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever you're planning, don't do it. We can find another way." She didn't look up from her work, but her hands stilled on the blade she was polishing. "Another way to what, Samuel?" "To get free. To get justice. To justice." She finally raised her eyes to meet his, and Samuel saw something in them that made him step backward involuntarily. "You think there's justice for people like us? You think if we just wait long enough, pray hard enough, work hard enough, someone's going to come along and set things right? I think if you do what you're planning, you're going to destroy yourself along with them." Violet set down her knife and turned to face him fully. "I've already been destroyed, Samuel. What's left is just deciding whether I'm going to die alone or take them with me. And what about me? What about us?